Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. Welcome to our expert panel, A CMO's Guide to Harnessing Digital Transformation, Harnessing AI for Digital Transformation in B2B Marketing, brought to you by our friends at One Magnify. I'm Brian Mink, co-founder and president of Data Science Connect, the world's largest data and AI community. Today, we're excited to welcome hundreds of attendees from all over the world to discuss how CMOs can be leaders of digital transformation in the age of AI. Effectively leveraging AI marketing requires more than just an AI strategy. It often requires a thoughtful digital transformation strategy as well to make use of valuable data from across many aspects of the organization. This means reimagining customer experiences through mass personalization, leveraging structured and unstructured customer data with AI, fostering cross-functional collaborations, and quickly learning and testing new technologies. Today, our expert panel will weigh in on these topics and more as we provide a roadmap for leading digital transformation initiatives. We're honored today to hear from a distinguished panel of experts from One Magnify. Camelia Dianati, Chief Technology Officer, Jonathan Prantner, Chief Analytics Officer, Mark Hammerchick, Digital Solutions Strategy Lead, and Jeremy Sutton, Director of Marketing Experience and AI. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. To make this feel a little more in person, we suggest you add a photo to your profile and include your bio, LinkedIn profile, and other information you want your fellow attendees to see. Next, please take advantage of the Q&A and chat features throughout the talks. We're dedicating a portion at the end to Q&A, so be sure to upvote the questions you'd like the panel to address. If you're wondering where your organization stands compared to others on your AI journey, check out the poll questions in the right sidebar. And finally, to learn more about digital transformation in the age of AI, check out the calls to action below throughout the webinar. Now, without further ado, let's kick off our panel. First off, we'll do introductions. So start with Camelia. Share a bit more about your background and your current role.
I'm come from an engineering background. I was a developer and started my journey from developing to executive, being a CTO at LendingTree, and after that at Bankrate. So mainly fintech background, product background, and have been Chief Technology Officer at One Magnify for the last 6 months. Happy to be here.
Excellent. Jeremy.
I'm Jeremy Sutton, Director of Marketing Experiences and AI at One Magnify. I use AI all day, every day. Almost 80% of my workflows involve AI in some aspect. And while I'm not working at One Magnify, I teach digital marketing at the University of Michigan.
Jonathan.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Prantner. I'm the Chief Analytics Officer here at One Magnify. I come out of kind of a traditional math and stats background, but I've been in the marketing analytics space for the last couple of decades. I've seen it from kind of the measurement side at Nielsen, the agency side to the client side, and really seen how marketing departments and CMOs in particular have approached the new wealth of data that we've had in technology. So really excited for the conversation today.
Great. Mark.
Hello, Mark Hammerchick. I drive our digital strategy solutioning efforts at One Magnify. I've been in the digital marketing, strategy, analytics, commerce, and digital transformation space for over 20 years, both on the B2B and the B2C side, and both from the client and the agency side.
Well, excited to get going with the discussion today. So the first question we have is, what role do CMOs play in driving digital transformation so that they can effectively execute their marketing strategy? So what is the role of the CMO in all of this? Camelia, why don't you start us off?
Of course. So full disclosure, I've never been a CMO, but I have worked with many good ones. And the common thread that I have found with them, the really good ones, has been that they have a deep understanding of the products and the goods that the company sells. They have a pretty good understanding of the customers. And what they do with that knowledge is that they sort of merge those two things and become the custodians of the customer journey from its inception all the way through retention. And all the while doing their very best to protect the brand and make sure that the promise of the brand is realized.
Very interesting. Jonathan, what do you think?
So I would build on what Camelia said there, because I always think of CMOs as having kind of an aspirational role, right? Because their goal is really to kind of foster a deep and meaningful relationship with brands. It's not just a finance function. It's not just about communication, it's about making those connections that are aligned with the brand's values and objectives so that they're able to move that forward and create that long-term ongoing relationship between the customer and the brand.
And to add on top of that as well, there is some differentiation between being a CMO for a B2B oriented company and a B2C company. And, those customer journeys can vary quite a bit. Whereas maybe if you're in the B2B space, you're always catering to a number of stakeholders at an individual company and kind of helping their journey along across multiple service lines or product lines. Whereas in B2C, you're living more on a kind of a transactional nature where you're trying to bring a lot of users in the door. But, it's interesting that AI can kind of help and assist, drive efficiencies in almost all those processes, no matter the focus, as your daily role as a CMO.
And from a C-suite and relationship level, CMOs really need to build meaningful relationships at the C-suite, along with their CIOs and CTOs and other technology leaders. They really need to be the evangelist for the customer at that level. And they really need to understand where the market is going and where the customer is going so that they can respond to it in meaningful ways, in ways that drive ROI and returns.
Yeah, great point. So I'm hearing that, really customer focus, and that the CMOs, they are ultimately the owners of the relationships with the customers as well as the brand. So bringing that perspective to digital transformation and to what the organization is doing with AI, I think is a valuable place for the CMO to kind of thrive. So how do you think these digital transformation goals are evolving in light of AI, in light of what we're seeing with the sudden interest in Gen AI and a lot of sort of top-down pressure on CMOs from boards, from CEOs, from shareholders to drive progress, to leverage AI? How does digital transformation fit into all of that? How are things different than they might have been before all the AI hype began? Why don't we start with Jonathan on this one?
So I would say that when we look at what AI has done, is it has changed our concept of how we communicate to the customer. And so it has really taken the promise of digital transformation and helped bring it to reality, because the concept in the past has always been like, okay, we have messaging for kind of our different parts of the funnel. We're going to have our kind of awareness building, then consideration, perception, and purchase. But now it's transformed into more of kind of almost an always on, always in market, because the customer may not be in market for purchase at some certain point, but what AI allows us to do, and it has really accelerated the digital transformation process, is building that relationship with the brand, understanding when to speak to the customers, when to be quiet, being able to really take all of that feedback that we're getting from all that consumer behavioral data that we're gathering, that we can run through the systems to understand, to wait for the right moment to be able to speak to customers.
For sure.
Yeah, to just build on something Jonathan said, AI is a phenomenal accelerant in transformation. And when you start realizing how to implicate processes and applications and marketing workflows, it really does, help you scale and very quickly, even with smaller, more agile teams, because, a lot of the heavy lift can be done, with the help of AI tool sets and, training things like custom GPTs. So, I think it's almost kind of shifted the levels of expectations, that boards might have of, they want CMOs now to be reaching further, right? Is adopting, understanding, implementing AI, because, it is like throwing fuel onto a marketing fire. Is you can really, if you wield it correctly, and you get really good with prompting and prompt engineering, you can take it very far, especially on the content marketing side. So, just wanted to add that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just going to say the goal is always to delight the customer, right? So like hopefully AI is just a means to that end. But to Jeremy's point, it's taking more and more to delight the customer as they see the tools and the things that are available to them. So I think the goals somewhat have stayed unchanged, but the stakes have been increased because people's expectations have increased.
Absolutely. Mark, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think when AI works most effectively, it's almost invisible to the customer. They're not even aware that they're being guided, that the data behind the data is driving that next decision point. And I can use a real example of my satellite services provider chatbot, the services chatbot. From last year to this year, it's improved significantly, and that's because it's continually learning and it's continually getting better and better. For me, it's such an experience. I don't even realize all of that data that's being used in the background, but it really anticipates my next question, which is really what effective marketing should do. It anticipates what you need and it delivers what you need at the right time.
Absolutely. So what I'm hearing from this question is the expectations have never been higher, and I think when you start playing around with Chat GPT and personal GPTs and see kind of the capabilities, I think there becomes a lot of pressure on CMOs to, why can't we do this? Look at all the things that ChatGPT can do. Why is it taking so long to do this? Why can't we have this incredible chatbot? Why can't we make this a more seamless experience? And I think in organizations where you've got a lot of data, where there are significant consequences if you roll something out that is not ready for prime time, or that's leveraging data that is maybe not appropriate to be used in that context, there could be some real risks, or at least some real challenges associated with doing this. That leads to the next question here, which is, how can marketers partner with IT and analytics teams to develop some of this? How do they make sure that either we're doing this responsibly, that we're doing this in a way that is ready for prime time when it ultimately is rolled out? So why don't we start with you, Camelia?
So data integrity remains to be the main vein to the heart of really anything product marketing, and especially AI. So the whole concept of garbage in, garbage out is very, very true and very relevant still with AI. So making sure that you have a healthy data ecosystem that is well governed and is compliant, it becomes very important. And there are bigger companies like ChatGPT, and they can go live and they can sort of push the boundaries. They also have outages, and because of the bit of a hype and the reputational, I think, currency, they can afford to do that. If you're a smaller company with a smaller budget and not as much, as much as publicity and hype, then you can't really afford to miss that much, right? So your margin of error becomes smaller. So to me, first and foremost, for AI is like anything else we've ever done with software, specifically making sure that you have a healthy data ecosystem, and that is the data hygiene and the integrity of it is observed.
Absolutely.
I can layer on some insights also too from a content marketing perspective. You really have to, if you're deeply involved in marketing content to your customers and consumers, you got to really conscious about the quality of the content you're producing with AI. And one of the things that I like to train all of our GPTs on is Google's quality rater guidelines. I'll actually drop a link inside of the chat. It's a really informative PDF, but really what I try to do is train up a GPT to write in the style that Google feels is validating a proper user experience, right? And you really have to put the user at the center of your marketing efforts, and just be careful, obviously, as you start producing content and scaling content up, really start using intelligent ways to train up, writing styles, voice and tone. You've got to use it ethically and responsibly. This is not just a plug and play solution or formula. It's only as good as you lead it, right? So just keep that in mind, is always educating and training is a best practice here.
Absolutely. And I had not seen those guidelines before. I think it's a great suggestion for training a GPT. Mark?
Yeah, and to build on that, and what Camelia mentioned earlier around the ecosystem and the environment, one of the key ways to drive collaboration between marketing and IT is to deliberately and focus them on the same team. You need to involve all of these people from the start. You need the representation from IT, from data science, from marketing, from analytics. They all need to be part of that AI team from the start. I mean, the most successful AI pilots really focus on demonstrating, business potential, not on technical feasibility, We're trying to drive a solution that will drive specific outcomes. And you need that shared point of view involving your business partners and your software engineers, because they're key partners in that team.
Absolutely. Jonathan?
Yeah, and I think to that point, because kind of that integration that Mark was just speaking about kind of leads back to something that Jeremy was saying. When we think about content generation specifically, right? We want to think about that with what the goal is. Because earlier you said that, CMOs are feeling the pressure to use AI to put it forward. And so when we think about the ways that they're interacting with IT and development teams that create these things, one of the key things is really having that vision of what they want to do. And usually that vision revolves around the concept of, segmentation, targeting, and personalization.
What I would actually encourage a lot of CMOs to think about, because I find myself doing this because it's practical, is, there might be applications your teams use every day. Let's say, Microsoft Excel, Google Sheets, Microsoft Word. And, really, I mean, I find myself doing a lot of data transformations in something as simple as Sheets or Excel, right? And there's a series of extensions you can install and be up and running by transforming large data sets very easily with a very limited learning curve. I think your teams can scale that up and out. If you've used things like GPT-4 or you're experimenting with those, I actually noticed in the chat that we have a participant here named Lauren, who said she's developed 13 custom GPTs for everything from running a customer centricity audit all the way to doing music mashups. And that's a fantastic way to actually get a lot of value very quickly. Custom GPTs can be trained to do very specific things. And I've actually myself, just in very kind of nuanced workflows, built around 20 custom GPTs to handle things at an expert level, right? And I do advocate and recommend for that, as you think about, depending on the size of your marketing teams, is having them be, understanding of, how you configure a custom GPT. These are things that you can practically implement very quickly and start winning, a lot of score with your board and your other advocates. And also getting back to this customer journey is starting to drive value. I mean, AI is phenomenal for marketing research. And I find myself ideating, creating, even coming up with taglines and slogans by conversations through ChatGPT. So, I would always encourage you, even if there's a mental barrier saying, where do I start? Or how do I get my teams engaged? I would say, just kind of dive right in and treat it as a conversation, learn as you go. There's a lot of, we can obviously provide resources from One Magnify, but I'm just saying it's a lot of this can be learned as you learn, do it and experience it. So I just wanted to, kind of give you some motivating ideas here to start putting it to use if you haven't done so already.
Yeah. And I think that actually goes to a idea that you've been discussing a lot, Camilla, around kind of the personas and some of the things that we've seen in the market and how that can apply specifically to brands.
Right. Before getting into that, I wanted to just basically mention one thing about just true to my role, is that if precision and accuracy is what you're looking for, that's where we need to make sort of the clarity in goals. And then some of the traditional BI and data warehousing could be more appropriate. Whereas trends and instructional and ideation and more, if accuracy and precision is not the goal, then absolutely 100% agree with what Jeremy was saying. And this is a conversation we internally have all the time. And we're talking about all the different companies that have now came up with this whole idea of like a best friend as a sort of version of a ChatGPT, but as like a mentor, as a friend. And I find that really, really interesting in that I've watched a lot of podcasts and people that the CEO of all these various companies come in and talk about all the great ways that, loneliness is a big problem in around the world. And if the next best human option is not available, and if you're going through a tough time, a chatbot can be actually impersonating a friend. Now, there are definitely issues with that. And so you can see all the ethical and how far you can go within that. And those are all the issues that companies that are going that route need to be taken into account. But in the consumer space, I think that's really interesting to be able to impersonate your customers. And anticipate some of their behaviors without having to actually data mine them. So could be a really good solution for preserving privacy and also anticipating based on past behaviors, being a good indicator of future, be able to predict what customers would potentially could do. And then so it gives a whole new definition to your segmentation and what you expect from your customers in the future.
So essentially almost a AI powered focus group. So that
Right.
rather than being something that organizations, and especially when we think about CMOs, because they get such valuable deep insights from that, but being able to see with all those variations that Jeremy's talking about the content and the custom GPTs, to have another system that's actually responding to that, telling you what parts resonate, what parts don't. Because the other great thing about an AI powered focus group is they don't get tired about follow-up questions. They can
Right.
dive in and kind of give you those whys behind it, because getting to the broader context of how AI is changing digital transformation, it's really helping everyone understand the why, because it's reacting to the data. It's giving that kind of immediate feedback that lets us go forward and act on those insights.
And they respond quickly. They respond to your text messages. If anybody's interested further in that aspect of it, Kevin Russo from New York Times basically befriended like 18, 19 different people and has sort of documented his experience through those relationships. And that's a fun little read to sort of with his experiences about being part of chatbots and just basically having, AI friends, which, sounds both very dystopian, but also hopeful at the same time.
Absolutely. So one follow-up to that, guys, I think, and sorry for the technical difficulties here, I think the platform's having issues, but one follow-up to all of that, I think is a good point, which is there are certain use cases like the personal GPTs there are certain things you can do with them that are no problem at all, that would not create any compliance issues, not create any issues of feeding in confidential proprietary data. And you can do lots of powerful things with them, both on your own and in a business context. And then there's some other use cases that maybe you could do the quick and dirty way in ChatGPT and you could get pretty far with it. But at an enterprise level, it might cause significant headaches, heartburn, compliance risk. So just kind of speak to that of how do you draw that line if you're a CMO who's trying to move quickly, trying to do something that's impactful, but on the other hand, you don't want to do anything that's going to backfire or going to cause more trouble than it's worth to your organization. So how do you balance those two things?
There's a pretty easy rule of thumb here that I use, which is if you're intending on the content you're producing to be in the public domain, right? You're not necessarily using any secret IP, right? I would say in most cases, where you're transforming data that's IP, secretive, intellectual property rights, that's where you really have to be very smart and very focused on, do you want the platform to be learned and trained on it, right? And that's a distinction I use a lot of time is not, I feel comfortable training on voice and tone because it's publicly available, right? The GPT can crawl our website, understand our brand, and they can use that as a trajectory for a lot of the content that we're going to create from it. So I kind of use that litmus test very quickly is it public domain? And am I asking it to become an expert based on something that is already in the public domain? And if it is, I move right along. But if it's not, I'll get on the phone with Camelia. I'll start talking risk, security, strategy. Those conversations can go on. So that's really kind of where you sometimes make that differdifferentiation.
And I like that
Jeremy and I,
focus.
Sorry, Mark. Jeremy and I do this kind of trade-offs, and we talk all the time about what information and what guardrails we want to put in place. Sorry about that, Mark. Go ahead.
No, you already had touched on it. It's just it's critical when you are as a CMO and you want to deliver pilots, you want to deliver results. You need to be careful around what the data you're going to use to do that with. You want to be very vigilant about handling anything that is connected to PII. You want to ensure that you really have some strict data anonymization in place. And just, you need to be very careful about how you manage that data and make sure that it's encrypted as you're going through this process so you don't get a nasty surprise at the end of it.
If you notice, Apple just announced partnership with OpenAI with ChatGPT, and what they're very animate about and very explicit and have gone around and done a huge publicity sort of a efforts outside of their conference is the fact that they're going to get the consumer consent before they send any information to ChatGPT. So you have to explicitly give your permission. And once you do, and once they bring the answers back, they're going to caution you against the accuracy of the results. So, so Apple is basically taking those steps of making sure that the consumer is actually aware of what's being sent, and also that they're sort of protecting themselves against unpredictable hallucinations that AI may have.
Yeah, it's a very interesting partnership.
Oh, sorry, go on, Jim.
Yeah, that's a very interesting partnership for a couple of reasons. One is that OpenAI will now be trained on every iPhone user, that is asking it for information. So I think OpenAI's models will get so much more sophisticated, training on obviously that human interaction. But this is going to be so impactful to search marketing as a whole. If you're a CMO and one of your big channels, big inbound channels for your website is search, whether it's organic search, paid search, this is going to be a game changer for how people use search engines. We've got to be conscious of that too. I think Google knows that that's a big problem coming for their product stack. They monetize Google ads so heavily. But the reality is I find myself doing a lot of my searches on ChatGPT first before I even go to Google, if it's an informational based search query. So, you have to think about that in the years ahead is how do you dial in your search marketing philosophies around this ever changing, level of solutions that customers and consumers now have through AI. I think that's going to be, something that all CMOs need to follow, very attunely, especially if search marketing is one of your bread and butter channels for your marketing efforts.
It'd be interesting what percentage of the iPhone users are actually consent to that, because, I use ChatGPT. I have an iPhone. Would I consent or not? I don't know yet. Chances are yes, but that would be really, really interesting because they would have to consent to it, correct? In order for ChatGPT to even have the information to be able to train on it. That's the assumption we're making, that people are going to opt in, because the assumption is opt out. So yes, somebody has to explicitly say yes. At least that's what Apple is portraying it as right now. So
that'll be interesting to see how that comes to bear, because it's kind of like the ability to asking apps not to track you across things. Mm-hmm. People have not seen a detriment in saying, no, I don't want the app to track me. So that's something. So it depends how much of the functionality will be removed from this. Yeah. And I think that gets us to, with what Jeremy was saying, to this broader concept around search, and also around, okay, not only am I taking my information and I'm saying, is this public? I'm going to use it for voice and tone, so I'm comfortable with this. Is this internal information? But for CMOs, it's a reimagining of the entire customer experience of what they're putting forward. Because the search calculus has long been, okay, Google has an algorithm, we're going to work with it so that when people are searching for something, we will navigate them to us, and now they will have our version of the story. Well, how does that look once we have these public LLMs, OpenAI or others, that are taking not only your information? Let's just assume a consumer brand here in the electronic space, right? They're not only going to take your information, they're going to take what people are saying on blogs, they're going to take review sites, they're going to take all of that and synthesize it together. So now if we have a form where people are no longer searching and navigating, where they're going to know when they go to the brand site, they're hearing the brand voice. When they go to a review site, they're going to hear comparisons. Having this mixture is really something that CMOs, in a large part, are going to have to tackle, because what does it mean to be able to have your message break through in a new world when your message is just one of many voices?
Absolutely. So I guess as a follow-up to all of this, so what happens when there's a disagreement, right? How do you collaborate across teams? You might have different perspectives. The CMO has a perspective, maybe the CEO has a perspective, IT has a perspective, the CDO has a perspective. Everybody's sort of got a different viewpoint on what is a safe and responsible and effective way to roll out AI or to go about digital transformation in this new world that we're living in. So how do you handle those disagreements, and how do you optimize your solutions in light of those different perspectives?
So healthy conflict resolution, and you hope that people have different point of views, right? Because the outcome of those varying views can become something that's better than any individual can pursue. So, and you can only have that if you have environments of mutual trust and respect. What I can speak to for technology, I don't view our place as a naysayers or saying no. I say yes, but, and ask a bunch of questions. Jeremy can vouch for that. So, and give options. I have my opinion. I have an opinionated idea about all of it. There is a floor. There are things that, I've even used the point of, technology malpractice, or like things that I know they're going to break. So we're going to have a lot of conversation. Thankfully, we've never had to do that. We're not there at One Magnify. But understanding the sort of the boundaries with which we're okay to make sure that we're not doing anything illegal or unethical, all of that, there's always compromise to be made. And as long as people are coming in with good faith and have that mutual trust and respect, the compromises or the solutions that you come up with, and doesn't always mean 50-50. It a lot of times means one person changing the other person's mind, means that you're a team and you work as a team. And again, you just figure out how to resolve the questions. And one other thing that I would mention about it is making the implicit explicit. And what I mean by that is the fact that, like everything else in life, software solutions, AI, there's a series of trade-offs. And what happens a lot in software development and now with AI is the fact that the implicit decisions and trade-offs that are being made are not very clear to all the stakeholders. So all the way from the CEO to CMO to everybody in the C-suite, if everybody understands all the trade-offs that we're making from worst case scenario to best case scenario, I would think that then a solid, working, effective C-suite can make the right decisions. I think when people start making assumptions and those implicit assumptions don't become explicit is when people get caught off guard and surprised, and they tend to not be surprises for good. They tend to usually be surprises for not good.
Yeah, I would say if
you're explicit, Amelia, because it really focuses on, pardon me, Jeremy, it really focuses on agreeing to what the outcomes are. Where are we headed? What's the roadmap? Make sure we have agreement there. Make sure we have the ability to listen attentively, to be flexible, to be adaptable, because this is new technology. We're using new systems, and where possible, test and learn before you scale. That's critical to get that sense of what is our shared outcome, shared goals, and let's work. Let data help us get there, not just opinions.
Yeah, and I would say if you're a CMO and you have a CTMO or CTO that you're paired with, what Camelia and I have found to work out really well is, I like to push the envelope with ideas, ideation, really trying to push out of the comfort zone to see how much value we can extract from scaling AI. And, at the end of the day, your CTO is going to be responsible for risk, security, the whole philosophy of the business on how that technology is adopted. And we're not just even talking content here. I mean, we're writing micro applications with AI, right? So we just wrote 3 micro applications to add to our website using ChatGPT for HTML, CSS, and JS. And when that rolls over into that tech stack that we run, right, you really have to be synchronous with your CTOs to get that maximum value, because they're going to have different objectives, as a CMO might, but you really have to kind of marry the two together and get to that happy medium of what's not going too far and what are we comfortable with, what's secure. These are good conversations to have. You really want to push each other. I think that's what we're finding works well, is just to kind of try to keep pushing new ideas, new concepts, and then, feel out that security and risk profile as you go.
Absolutely. And I think one thing we've heard is maybe even considering formalized channels or focus, task force within your organization where you've got different perspectives coming together, whether it's the C-suite or whether there's relationships that are, maybe at levels that are not C-suite, that are across different sectors of the organization where you're incorporating perspectives from marketing and IT and data and legal, and so that you avoid those surprises that you mentioned, Camelia. So you've got all the folks at the table who need to have this discussion about, well, what data are we using and how are we going to roll this out? I think those are really good perspectives.
And in the B2B world, where is the world we operate in, the risk tolerance of your client also becomes really, really important. I am the CTO for One Magnify, and I have a risk profile that I have for One Magnify. If I'm working with a big client, all of a sudden my standards and my risk profile really needs to match theirs. So in a B2B world, there's another dimension that you have to take into account. Because you have to adapt and adjust what your comfort levels are and match it to the client's goals, but also so a lot of times you're finding yourself negotiating between the different groups within the same client, marketing, the CMO and the CTO, but you're the sort of the bridge that gets them to talk in the middle of, right? And understanding their goals and objectives and their risk tolerance.
Yeah, and it's a generally good idea, right? And Camila's point is spot on, which is, if you're a CMO of a larger company where you have a lot more to lose than you do to gain, you need to be really conscious about that. And that's where these kind of focus groups and kind of bi-weekly roundtables and meetups are going to be really helpful, just to make sure everyone's aware and on top of what's being, proposed or what's being considered. But those are all just healthy dialogues. And I think if you're a CMO, whether you're a small company or a large company, you're probably willing to take more risks at a smaller company, right? Where you can really push scale, faster, more furiously. And just to Camelia's point, right? It's all proportionate, right? Is you have to manage these things concurrently. But AI is a great conversation to always have, and try to push your own personal boundaries in your creative process.
Yeah, and I think one of the main differences we're seeing is a lot of the considerations that the CTOs have had historically around the tech stack are for the first time really starting to bleed into the CMO's perspective. Because based on what Mark was saying about kind of that test and learn philosophy, part of it is also like, okay, great, we can use tools. Everyone loves AI when it comes to increasing productivity, to taking rote processes and making that. But when we think about it for content, for communications, what is the expected benefit we're going to get for this versus the relative costs and risks that we have? So that's a role that the CTO has historically played in over and over, which is relatively new for the CMO. So that partnership and those connections that Jeremy is discussing are so important because it is a new realm for a lot of people on the marketing side.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see CMOs having to become a lot more well-versed in technology and sort of the changing landscape of technology than maybe they have had to be historically, just because of all the pressure that's coming to be able to implement AI in every aspect of what we're doing as organizations. So how do you think CMOs can get up to speed on that? How do you see the skill sets changing? What can CMOs do today to prepare for that shift?
It's a great question. I find myself, just as wearing my marketing cap, right? And I'm thinking about, users, consumers, really leading a B2B marketing effort. I really try to think about how can I do my own discovery and find ways of doing things. And what I've found, honestly, is you could read any material you're sent via, a white paper or PDF. You could jump on YouTube even, for inspiration. But what I've been finding too is I learn the most by using the AI products themselves, right? Like I start having a conversation with ChatGPT. And as I'm having that conversation, I start thinking to myself, wow, why don't I push this further? Why don't I start asking more responsive questions, building off of ideas? It's very iterative. And I don't think a lot of people realize that is most of my best outcomes from AI are taken from a starting point that I conversationally move through various stages until I get to something very refined, and it usually spawns new ideas for research, right? So I think at the CMO level, you have to push yourself as well and really test, tune, and adapt. I found that to be very successful because you won't find every form of instruction in one place. And I also think that's important too, as you train your marketing teams that sit below you as a CMO, You really have to know how to advocate to them how to use this practically day to day, right? You want to find some easy wins. You want to get your team trained up by doing it kind of first and dabbling a little bit if you're tech savvy. I think that's a great thing to do. And I've found great success in doing it that way.
So learn by doing it is critical, Jeremy. I'd like to build on that. And a real example from a prior role I was in, we were faced with that same issue. How do we learn about this AI application that we want to use? And it was a lot around, well, let's all use it. Let's learn together. Let's lean on our colleagues in the technology world. Let's lean on our colleagues in the analytics world. And let's try some things and learn by doing. It's a critical way to learn, just as importantly as you scan what your competitive set is doing out there as well. It's critical.
Absolutely. Familiar, Jonathan, any thoughts there?
Yes, I would say, and because one thing Emily said earlier about how the CMO's role is kind of being that custodian of the customer journey. And I think one of the powerful aspects is rooting it in that mindset. Because if you have that collaboration with IT and with analytics across there, they will be able to get the CMO up to speed on conceptually what's happening, what AI is trying to recreate, what it's doing. But then by constantly grounding themselves in that end customer's point of view and seeing it through that lens, almost in a way being cognizant of all of the other pieces and the underpinnings behind, but going to what Mark said earlier about kind of some of the best AI being invisible, just thinking about that customer experience and rooting it in that and what you want that either digital cross-channel, what you want that experience to be for the customer, and then allowing the teams to come to you with how AI can solve that. So by holding tight to that core principle, I think that has enabled CMOs to approach it from a certain extent that they can really dive into it. And then the technology kind of explains itself along the way.
Yeah, there's one other piece here, which I think a lot of CMOs, think about come budgeting time, their kind of daily interactions. A lot of the products that you might use every day, your CRMs, right, your analytics platform, they are now infusing AI as well. So it's not just Chat GPT. We're talking and creating your own custom GPTs. It's how is your tech stack evolving with AI, and also how does that kind of influence the total AI picture for your marketing efforts, right? So always be attuned to the products that you're managing day in, day out. For example, we use HubSpot as a CRM. HubSpot is releasing AI improvements and feature sets all the time to help with those marketing efforts, right? So it's not just that you have to build this on your own, it's also being attuned to how the products that your team uses are evolving as you move along, right? So I think that's really important too, to follow the development of all these other, integrated applications that you might use under contract and under license within your organizations.
One thing I would add at the end of the day, though, this is not just for AI, but for any, as a technologist, I mean this, if you're using something just for its own sake, if you're not using it as a means to an end, perhaps, examine your reasons for it. If you're using the AI because the ambitions of what you want to do are sort of surpassing the actual execution, question the reasons for it, and always be able to tie it back into productivity, customer delight, some measurable thing that you can associate it with, so that you're not just doing it, unless you want to just learn and you're just a lifetime student. But if you are a CMO, if you're in a C-suite, make sure that the thing that you're picking, it's the technology is not the end. It's a means to a much greater end.
Yeah, and to your points, I think ChatGPT, one of the great things about it is a great space to go in and play around, as long as you're doing so in a secure way, to go in and see what is possible and to imagine before you try to roll out something that's enterprise, that's something that's going to take a lot of resources to develop and a lot of folks to weigh in on. You can really just go into ChatGPT and play around with it, train a personal GPT, figure out, does this use case make sense? Would it be valuable? Is this something that AI can help with? And then if it makes sense to build on that, then you can certainly build something for your enterprise that then leverages that for value. And so you can, to your point, Camilla, if you just want to get in there and play around and see what's possible, there's a space to do that with very low stakes. And then if you want to raise the stakes and make it something important, then that can be a separate project that your team could tackle. So let's all kind of look into our crystal balls here and think about what's coming down the pike now, what's in the future, what are the trends that we expect in digital transformation and AI over the next 5 or 10 years in light of what we're seeing today. So what are your predictions as far as how marketing is going to evolve in light of these new technologies?
I think personal assistant, whether it's in private or in a corporate, at least this is my hope, that the boring, soul-crushing aspect of our jobs can be outsourced to AI so that we all can scale ourselves both personally and professionally. Understanding all the success of these companies that have created these, friend AI or mentor AIs or whatever the case may be, I'm thinking that there's going to sort of go that way. But I think about sort of at the dawn of the internet when I was learning, basically going from C++ development to learning HTML, e-commerce and shopping online was very, very obvious. Like that, I could see a lot of that coming. What I couldn't see was the gig economy. I couldn't see Uber or Airbnb. If you had talked to me in late 90s or early 2000s, I wouldn't have been able to predict that. So what I'm asking myself now is, what is the Uber or Airbnb for AI? And I honestly don't know. I think that it depends on a lot of different conditions. And so people that are in the prediction game or time travelers, I'm more than happy to listen to and learn from. But I think that's going to be the interesting thing, to see where it pivots to and where we go. But my personal hope is that it would enrich all of our lives and get us more free time so that we can scale ourselves up both personally and professionally.
Yeah, I would say, as a CMO, your lead generation efforts are going to be drastically impacted by, the role of AI. And I think you always have to be on the bleeding edge of understanding those shifts and those changes, because, if you look at your analytics data for your website today, those channels driving a lot of your leads or, some of your kind of marketing programs that you're running, that may be mixed, and toppled on, just almost in, a year or two, where, consumer interactions and the mediums that we use to consume information and content are going to change drastically. So I think you need to always kind of be very open-minded about that as a CMO. I think AI is going to just greatly alter, how we get information on demand as a consumer. And you have to think back to that idea of the consumer journey, right? Is how do we get and step back into that once these kind of use patterns change and do exist with new technology, like the iPhone announcement, right? I'm going to find new value that I've never gotten from Siri before, on my iPhone. And that may alter how many searches I do a day for, influential information or even commercial intent searches that I might do, on my own time. So you need to be really attuned to that. I also think too, we talk about UX and the customer journey. We're going to start seeing websites that build themselves. That's in the hopper for almost every platform that's out there, is dynamic, on-demand, AI-influenced content. The way that we might manage a dev team today to write custom code in a front end, that is going to be greatly impacted with AI. Really, if you can think of it and lead an AI solution to it, I just did this the other day, as I created an application that was suggested by ChatGPT and also coded by ChatGPT. So, all of us as CMOs have dealt with this issue of handing off this amazing idea to a tech team, and they say, "Oh, we'll come back in 6 months. Give us some Figma files, and we'll see what we can do." I think that's going to change, and I think how we expect to deliver customer experiences will be radically altered in the next couple of years once our big platforms, like Figma, like Adobe, they start adapting to these new ways of embracing and using AI. So I think you really need to be following that progression, especially how your marketing channels will be implicated.
I think we're entering a brave new world, basically, and looking ahead, AI has even become more critical and more integral to really driving dramatic and significant changes in analytics, in lead scoring, customer service automation, and understanding what we just talked about, the customer experience. I'd like to see a future where that entire business buyer purchasing journey becomes personalized, because it has seen and understood millions of similar journeys.
I apologize, I didn't mean to interrupt, but something Jeremy said really sparked an idea about what cloud did for infrastructure. I feel like AI is going to be doing to some extent for code. So there's very similar patterns in there. So I just wanted to sort of mention that based on what Jeremy said.
And I really see kind of where AI is going to take marketing in particular is it is going to just be a constant ongoing communication with the brand. And we're starting to see this with brands that have resonated with consumers for years, right? I mean, we look at brands that we know. We look at Jeep. Jeep is a lifestyle. It's not just a brand, right? Same thing we can see like, with other brands like Nike, things like that. We're going to start to see more of that where it's not that we're dipping in and out of the platform. It is going to follow us through where we are going to constantly in that way just to be like, hey, Nike, what should I have for dinner today? Well, based on what your phone is telling us about what you did, we can, plan out a meal for you and order. It's going to be where some brands are going to rise and they are going to be kind of just omnipresent for us by our own choice, though. It is going to be a charge for the CMOs to say, okay, how do I want to make people to opt into my brand to make us always be there? And I think the thing, to Camilia's point, that we haven't seen yet, that we don't know what it's going to look like, is going to be the way that integrates all of these different pieces together, because you don't need both Nike and Lululemon talking at you about the same things. You want them integrated in a way. So it's really going to be finding out how they can integrate together. And that's the change we're going to see. It's going to be that constant customer experience of we're always in market for something and being able to talk to us about the right things at the proper time.
Absolutely. And Camelia, I think you made a great point about sort of anticipating what is the equivalent of the gig economy for AI. And if you think about the gig economy, that's like a second and third generation internet thing. It's like really enabled by internet on our smartphones, right? So it's like, what's the AI, the iteration of AI that's going to be the equivalent of internet on our smartphones that's going to enable that next generation of innovation like the gig economy. So I think that's a very interesting way to think about it.
Yes. Yep.
So let's wrap up with a lightning round, just a quick, in one phrase or a few, what do you think is the key takeaway today for CMOs as they think about digital transformation in this new age of AI? So Camelia, let's start with you.
Is a means to an end, and delighting the customer should always be the end.
Jonathan?
I would say that AI makes the right message to the right customer at the right time a reality.
Mark?
I would say start small, learn, test in order to scale, and then drive that outcome at scale.
And Jeremy?
Yeah, I would say, use AI as an accelerant and adapt and, configure wisely, knowing who your customer is and what they need from your brand.
Excellent. Well, really valuable insights from all of you today. Thank you very much for a great discussion. Thank you to our audience for tuning in. Apologies for the technical difficulties with the platform. I think things got smoother as we went along. We will have a recording available if you missed anything. It'll be available right after this, and then we'll also send out kind of a cleaned up recording. We'll edit out any of the technical issues and send that out as well if you guys want to refresh on anything that you might have missed. Thank you again for a great webinar, and for our partners at One Magnify for making this possible. And